I think Gwiber might be the one card that has had the longest life in competitive play. First introduced in the sneak peek decks for Alice Cluster, the Welsh White Dragon was meta-relevant for almost all 25 months of its time in New Frontiers, and it's interesting how such a prominent card from 4 years ago is now almost worthless in the current meta. So today, let's take a look at this giant white worm, why he was so good, and why he's not good anymore. Let's find out what makes him tick. Wait a minute, dragons don't tick. For the cost of 1 light and 4 void, you get a 12/12 flyer. Pretty standard for stats back in Alice Cluster, but the real kicker for Gwiber was its effect to reduce its cost by 2 void for every other resonator you control that was put into the field that turn. This means that off 3 will you can put down a 1 cost, another 1 cost, and then Gwiber. This would give you a decent lead in board pressure for the fraction of its actual cost. Not much could really match Gwiber at this pace, and almost every deck that focused on him utilized ways to either guarantee that turn 3 threshold or to play him earlier. Alice's World is probably the most popular and memorable of these decks due to its competitive relevance up until Grim Cluster was rotated out. However, Alice's World also gives me nom-level flashbacks of what I think was one of the worst periods in the game's history. In general though, if you had a way to work Gwiber into your deck, you worked Gwiber into your deck. The start of Lapis Cluster made it possible to get Gwiber out on turn 1 with Feasting. Her effect is whenever you play 2 cards in a turn to put an elf token into your field. The ideal play would be to play a 0-cost Regalia, call a stone that hopefully has light as an attribute, play a 1-cost Wind Resonator off of Feasting's Energize, get a token from the Resonator and Regalia being played, and then drop Gwiber off your stone. Not many decks had a response to this, and it made the Feasting matchup frustrating since she gained a huge benefit whether she was going first or second. It's no surprise this big lizard was one of the first cards reprinted in Alice Origin, but he hasn't really shown up in any top lists. Or at least not top lists that matter. There's plenty of reasons for this, probably the biggest being that the game is in such a state now that a vanilla 12/12 flyer isn't really doing squat compared to everything else. That doesn't mean you should count him out though. A 12/12 body is still pretty hard to get over. A lot of decks need a turn or two in order to set up their OTK combos, and Gwiber forces a response out of them when they'd rather be floating moons, stacking bullshit counters, or just killing you. Thanks to the reintroduction of dual stones and just easy will fixing in general, you can put together plenty of different decks that either focus on or utilize Gwiber to push for the win. So here's a few variants to mull over if you're tired of Prisia. Or if you're tired of your idiot friend who says their top tier Valentina deck can beat Prisia. I'll start with what's probably the best one, just throwing him into Hanzo Control. The No Fun Allowed kitty cat already makes use of plenty of low cost resonators and is in the proper colors to utilize Gwiber. Hanzo offers a lot of what's similar to Feasting, right down to having ways to bounce stuff back into your hand to dodge destruction and board wipes. If you really want to get creative, just wait until Black Silence enters the mix again, and I'm pretty sure there'll be some stupid wind control deck involving Athenia that becomes super viable. If you kinda want something in a similar vein, but a bit more gimmicky, here's a Brunhild Shikigami variant. Instead of fairy tales, you play Japanese spirits and just go wide. Although I guess there is logically no reason you couldn't also put Kaguya in there if you wanted. And also, here's an incredibly inconsistent and untested Loki deck that uses Gwiber as an alternative to Neo Ragnarok. The way you play it is in Game 1, you go for the Gwiber strategy. Game 2, if you don't think they're going to side and don't cheat, then you go for the full Neo Ragnarok board. Or if you realize they're going to have don't cheat anyways, just play Gwiber again. It's not like you lose anything, Loki creates enough general bullshit on her own that Neo Ragnarok's kind of a win more card. If you want something in a stranger variant, both Faria and Lenneth can make good use of him thanks to him naturally being in their color. And I'm sure Valentina could find some use for him too, but I just don't feel motivated enough to try. I'm sure there's also something with Machina, but I feel like he's got a much better and more reliable win condition than Gwiber. And of course, now that I had already started editing this, there's an errata for Caduceus, so Lenneth and Faria are now slightly better at the Gwiber spam game, since they can now use Izanami's revival effect for only 1 will. That really does kind of speed the deck along. If you have an ear in your graveyard, you can use Izanami's ability off of your Caduceus, grab ear, and then have ear grab something else, and now you can play Gwiber for 1. Congrats, you now have access to a potential 2-will Gwiber. You're still not faster than the lesbian Wind Elf. You can easily set up the Grave with Dark Alice if you need to for this, and if you remember that any deck can use Regalia and not just the new rulers, you'll see it's better to just slip this into Adam instead, where you can have access to a shit ton more graveyard consistency cards thanks to your runes. In general though, Gwiber is just outpaced by most of the current impactful plays in the game. There being an abundance of low-cost removal options also makes it risky to play him without having access to resources to protect him as well. That's part of what made Feasting and Reflect variants so good. Apollo was a free return to hand card that you could use on turn 1. Now you need at least one Windwheel for something similar. If you are able to protect Gwiber though, or just go so wide that your opponent can't have a meaningful response, then he can still cause complications for an unsuspecting player. Although I doubt he'll be topping any event soon.